guys, welcome on in to Drinks with Binks. I'm Julie Stewart-Binks. We are working from home / wasted from home. This is week 5 of us doing this show from our homes. We know that you're watching this from your homes because we're all staying home to stay safe in a very unprecedented, weird time. But we need to save lives. We need to do what's right. And that's what we're doing. We're still drinking. We're still binking. And we are very excited to welcome in an esteemed guest. I've wanted her on the show forever. And now we're finally able to make it happen. We have got Jemele Hill, writer for The Atlantic. You know her from ESPN. Jemele Hill is Unbothered podcast. She does literally everything. Thank you so much for joining us today.
When you said esteemed, I had to turn around. Like, is she talking about me? I don't know about
who else
esteemed.
Is here.
Yes, I'm like, is there someone else? Is there another Jemele? I don't know about it. Really happy to be here. Love to be on any television or broadcast that involves drinking and talking. That's literally my 2 favorite things.
Isn't it great? I mean, it's very nice that my last name rhymes with it because now I can ride that one all the way to AA and then hopefully get workers' comp when I don't have a liver anymore. So it all works out. Yeah.
This is long range plan. Okay. I love it. Play the long game.
This is the money plans for long term. And speaking of the drinking, tell us what you have chosen today for us to drink.
Well, because anybody who is married, or especially if you're recently married, you understand this, you get lots of trinkets and things, right? So this glass actually says Mrs. on it, right? Because I got married in November. Because you get things.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But you get so much Mr. and Mrs. stuff, so many fiance stuff, so many wifey stuff that you just like, I'm using all this. Like, it's just happening. So I got a little Tito's on the rocks. I did myself the favor of pouring a double because I'm like, I need to make this last because I don't know if I'm allowed to get up and make another drink, but that's in another room. So I don't.
Oh yeah, you can do whatever you want on the show. You can. All right. Well, cheers. Thank you so much for being here on the show. I did something new today. I put a big cool ice cube in there. That's new for me. I'm not usually cool with the cool kids.
Okay. All right. Is that just like the one big block cube?
Ooh, yeah. And man, this is have some vodka on the rocks to get things going here today. Needed that. Also, I forgot to ask you, what are we toasting to today? What is something that you would like to cheers to?
Today, we're toasting to the fact that I actually had less than 5 Zoom calls. I'm so excited about this. This is my first non-5 Zoom call day in about, I don't know, a week. So today I've only had 1 Zoom call, and that's all that's on the agenda.
Okay. Well, that is huge. That is huge. Cheers. No Zoom calls, but I still was able to rope you into some sort of similar type of Zoom call.
This isn't Zoom. This doesn't count.
Yeah, well, Zoom fatigue is real, and you can't agree to every Zoom call, right? Like, or with your friends, you're like, I'm not able to do trivia every night. So gotta ask you, you're at home. Tell me what your setup's like. What's like a regular day in the life?
Well, I feel like I am, like my schedule, like I'm triple as busy as I think I normally would be, which it sounds like a complaint, but I don't mean to make it sound that way because I know there's a lot of people who are out of work who don't get to do some of the cool things that I do that I actually classify as work, but I realize everybody else may not look at it that way. But generally speaking, I'm usually up around 7:30-ish, mostly because my husband is an early riser. I married one of those. And
too bad.
Yeah, no. Though on Sundays I just refuse, and then it's just like 9:30 and deal with it. But so yeah, I'm usually up pretty early. Showering before noon is optional as far as I'm concerned, and like as long as it gets accomplished at some point in the day, I feel like that's pretty much good enough. I had a podcast interview with John Legend yesterday, and I told him I showered before noon just for him. I showered actually before 10 a.m. So he got literally the best of me.
That is awesome. That is so cool. You interviewed John Legend. Like, what was that like?
It was great. Like John, he and I, we have sort of known each other through social media. You know how now you have those relationships now, especially sometimes with celebrities. He is a big Ohio State fan. I went to Michigan State. So there was a time where we had a little bit of a rivalry where we would beat them at least once every 20 years. And now they just kick the shit out of us all the time. But he's a big sports fan. So our relationship kind of started that way. And we've been around each other in social situations and Everything is, we've always had like a good rapport. And he agreed to do my podcast. And we talked about him being at home with the kids, how him and Chrissy, what their lives are like, him and his wife, Chrissy Teigen, what their lives are like, as a couple, because it's kind of different. I've heard from my single friends about what it's like to be under COVID-19, but it's different when you're married or in a relationship because you have to resolve whatever comes up. That's not, you know what I'm saying? That's not to say you let it linger anyway, but if there's any issues that you need to put that fire out as quickly as possible because you're trapped in the house together. And so, we were talking about that and some of the new projects that he has coming up. I was very happy because I got John Legend, because you know how he comes off. He's so smooth, suave, Mr. Nice Guy, sexiest man alive. And I was so excited that I got him to say pussy ass bitch. I was so excited about this.
How did you get him to say that?
Well, his wife said it first because that's what she called the president on a tweet. And so I play this game with my guests. I give them two options, this or that. And she clapped back at him on Twitter before her own husband. And she clapped back at the president. So I asked him which one was better. And he said, oh, by far, pussy ass bitch. And I was like, oh, my God, I got John Legend to say pussy ass bitch.
That is awesome. That's got to be pretty surreal when you're just hanging, talking to John Legend. And you start to think, hey, my life's going pretty well right now.
That's not a bad quarantine assignment to have, but just in general, because I traded in, I was at ESPN, I had like one job and I traded in that one job for 25 jobs. And so, yesterday I taped not just that podcast, I also taped an episode of my new podcast that's out now that I have with Van Lathan that we're co-hosting together, Way Down in the Hole, which is a rewatch pod where we are watching every single episode of The Wire, breaking it down in a limited series podcast. So I had to take that like a couple hours, I had 2 Zoom calls, about 2 other projects I'm working on. I had a regular conference calls because the regular conference call is like out now. So when you get one of those, it's like, ooh, I picked up a rotary phone, right? Because everybody's like Zoom or Google Hangout or, it's always something video wise. And I also am completing my memoir. I'm writing a book.
Oh,
and
wow.
The book is due May 15th. And so I spend every day writing for minimum 2 hours. It's usually much longer than that. But I'm one of those writers, like I can't write to just complete silence. So one of the shows I got in on and just kind of dropped after like the first season was Grey's Anatomy. So I'm totally rewatching Grey's Anatomy right now, or watching Grey's Anatomy.
I mean, how do you fit all of this in a day is exhausting to me listening to your schedule.
And then at some point, I guess I got to be somebody's wife. So that
that's, you'll do that later. But on just quickly, before we go to break on your memoir, was that something that you'd planned to be doing right now? Or was it sort of like, oh, we're in quarantine, maybe I'll do this?
No, I signed a book deal last year. And so the plan was always this book was due May 2020. And it's going to come out in 2021 at some point. So this was going to be whether we were quarantined, not quarantined. I would have been spending 4 to 6 hours in the office every day writing. And
is it odd to say memoir when you're so young?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I am writing the book. I absolutely never wanted to write. I didn't want to write about myself. I always thought about writing a book, but I always thought about writing a fiction novel. And if forced to, and by forced to, I mean, if someone else had a really compelling story, like an athlete or something, and I, wrote their book or we did it in collaboration, then that would have been something I could have seen myself doing. But I did not want to write about myself. I did not want to write a memoir. But the market, I'll be honest, the market decided otherwise. And that's kind of why I'm doing it. But it's been good because I've been able to, relive and think about some things that I've been through in my life. And it's just an opportunity to tell my story. And I know people will be surprised by a lot of things in this book. So I'm looking forward to it. It's been a good process.
I'm sure it's very cathartic and you learn a lot about yourself, and interesting to go down memory lane in so many of those different stories. But we have a lot more stories that we want to get to with Jemele Hill. Guys, don't go anywhere. We are having some Tito's on the rocks with Jemele on Drinks with Binks. Hey guys, welcome back into Drinks with Binks with Jemele Hill. We are drinking on some Tito's on the rocks. We were just discussing Jemele's memoir, doing the Wire rewatchables, and all the different things with her podcasts. Jemele Hill's Unbothered with John Legend, and another thing, you're rewatching Grey's Anatomy, but the whole world is watching The Last Dance. And I found some of your tweets on Sunday funny about your husband in like full Michael Jordan gear. And it really was every single person in the world like had a photo of them with like MJ or in a Jordan jersey. And it was like, okay, this is the time to roll it all out.
Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't have been surprised because he is a huge Jordan fan. But in a way, it's a little disappointing because we're both from Detroit. Right. And probably I don't think our animosity toward Jordan is as bad as Cleveland because we did actually win championships. You know, the Pistons, Bad Boys won back-to-back titles. And for a long time, we were Jordan's nemesis because, you know, we beat him up and made him tougher and stronger. And we actually helped him become a champion. It's a little known fact. You know? we groomed Michael Jordan to becoming a champion.
I love that spin zone. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But no, so the relationship with us, we don't hate him as bad as maybe Cleveland fans do, but there's, you know, a little bit of a begrudging respect there because after our run was over, it was all about the Bulls for, you know, essentially the next decade plus. And so I often mess with him. Like, I do not understand why you're this big of a Michael Jordan fan, given what our roots are. But yeah, I watched it. I thought it was a great documentary. I moved really fast. And for as much as I thought I knew about Jordan, you know, I was 8 years old when he left North Carolina. And so because of that, you know, sort of that early Jordan, I'm not as familiar with as I am sort of the late 80s on Jordan, if you will. So I learned a lot of stuff. I mean, like everybody else, I was absolutely flabbergasted about how underpaid Scottie Pippen was. Yeah, but it makes sense. I mean, the NBA that we know it today with the salary caps, you know, and with the explosion in television money, it just wasn't as financially robust as a league then as it is now. And look, until Jordan took those 1-year deals, you know, worth about $30 million, those last couple of years that he was with the Bulls, he was also underpaid for a superstar of his caliber. I mean, we forget Magic Johnson took like a 20-year contract with the Lakers for $1 million a year. That was considered a lot of money. And now, you know, it's like you have 8 players. I looked at the NBA salaries for the 1920 season, and you have 8 players making over $30 million.
Yeah.
So things have changed a lot, but it was good. I think it was, you know, great, mostly because, I don't know, I think this is probably the first time since maybe the finale of Game of Thrones that everybody in America has been watching something at the same time and in real time and commenting and creating conversations. And with all of us ingesting so much information about COVID and a lot of people living with anxiety constantly, I thought it was just a welcome break and relief for a lot of people.
Yeah, it was great. And as you mentioned, like everyone's live tweeting it essentially too. That would make no sense, but every single person was watching it. And I was curious though, thinking, I agree with you, it moves so fast. But then when you look at it, there's 6 more episodes and there's so many different characters on that team to sort of profile as well. But is 6 more episodes too much for one season? Like, how do you feel about that?
You know, it's funny when they first announced that they were doing this with the Michael Jordan doc. I thought, are people really going to watch that much of Michael Jordan? And which today I know sounds pretty preposterous because absent of us living under the umbrella of this pandemic, there's always been a very significant appetite for anything Michael Jordan. I mean, just look at his shoes. I mean, he hasn't played in a decade plus, and yet people still, when his shoes come out, they act like he's still playing, and he's the most relevant retired athlete probably ever. Like it's just amazing the currency his name still has. So it felt that way, but I mean, limited series of anything is kind of in. Netflix does it all the time. I mean, Look, I mean, we as a nation collectively watched, what was it, 8 episodes of Tiger King? I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? It's like
I
we could
know.
watch 8 episodes about Joe Exotic, but not about Michael Jordan. I mean, I think we could probably take it, but it is for a network like ESPN. This is a very unique approach. I was not surprised at all that this was like their highest rated documentary ever. But it doesn't. It seems like it should be too much, but I don't think it is, because Michael Jordan himself is invested in this, and that we're seeing him comment on these things, and this is probably the most honest and open he's ever been. And I think because he's been a little bit more closed as a retired person, that this gives it a sense of urgency and that it's special.
Right. Yeah. And seeing him sitting there with the cigar and the drink and sort of being, yeah, we haven't seen Michael like this. And he wants it to be this huge documentary. And I got to ask you, there's especially someone like yourself who worked at ESPN and encountered varying different opinions on this. The use of Barack Obama and Bill Clinton in this documentary, I read from the filmmakers, they said we wanted to have people in there for a reason to be in there, not just because they're celebrities, not just because they're big names, and sort of the idea of Chicago resident and, you know, Arkansas resident. But by that same token, you're still using two very huge political figures. How do you feel about ESPN using these politicians?
I think it made sense within the documentary, and that was really all they needed to prove. If it had been a bit more gratuitous, I think people would probably be saying, hey, aren't you the let's not mix politics and sports? Aren't you the stick to sports kind of, you know, at least you seem to have adopted that mantra or whatever. But with Barack Obama, it just made too much sense. And I love how they founded him as former Chicago resident and not former president of the United States. I mean, even though we know he's from Hawaii, a big part of his identity is Chicago. And that's kind of what people consider him. They consider him a Chicago resident, a Chicago authority. And so I think that it wasn't something that I felt like was going to get them into any kind of trouble. And if I'm not mistaken, they at the NBA All-Star game, because that was in Chicago, they also used Barack Obama as well in their introduction, which is like one of the dopest things I'd ever seen. And, you know, I mean, I know that the stick to sports crowd is going to forever wail, and God bless them, wear yourselves out. It's just not realistic. And a lot of it is just really based off their feelings about particular people, because I have a feeling that if it was somebody that they liked, if it was a politician that maybe they admired that wasn't these two, they wouldn't complain about at all about the presence in this in this documentary. Yeah, I mean, it would make sense if you were doing a documentary on the Rangers when they had A-Rod. You have to have, you know, George W. Bush in that, because he was a part owner. Like, that's kind of the way it works. Right. So people sometimes need to just get over themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not trying to put you in any weird position here, but like for you, when
I
you
like being in weird positions. What are you talking about?
You're like, I thrive on that.
I thrive on weird positions.
Yeah. Is the idea of seeing them is you know, saying I totally agree with them using politics in this capacity, but then when you used politics within sport and you made comments on in that realm, they had a different feeling. Like, does it ever feel as though they may sometimes talk out of both sides of their mouth?
They do. They have to. It's corporate America. That's what happens. And, you know, with the Trump stuff, that wasn't the first time I experienced maybe being, it was definitely the biggest in terms of publicity and that sort of thing. But, you know, if you notice at ESPN overall, there are varying degrees of punishment. Everybody does not get punished the same. Everybody does not face the same level of scrutiny. It is part of what you don't like it all the time, but it's part of what you sign up for when you go there. They're going to react based off how big a deal does this become. And if my tweets about the president had not become a big deal, they would not have reacted the same way. And even though since I've left and since that happened, there's been, you know, other people at the network who have said things about politics on their Twitter feeds as I did mine. And I haven't seen the reaction or anything happen to them. I'm not wishing that it did happen to them.
Right.
In fact, I'm glad they got away with it, to be perfectly honest. I'm rooting them on, like, get away with it when you can. I realized that part of the way they reacted to me was just based off the fact that this thing went all the way up to the White House. And so it's not something that that makes me mad or frustrated. It just indicates, I think, sometimes what a tricky position it can be when you're ESPN and you're unfortunately signing yourself up for the totally impossible task of trying to make everybody happy. You can't. I get it. Like, they've never been, my last 2 years there was the most I'd seen ESPN ever become polarizing. I think part of the reason they became polarizing is frankly because of the president. It really didn't have anything to do with the programming. It didn't have to do with the personalities, regardless of what I said. But when you have a president that openly attacks sports and athletes, that is going to force a network to take a position by proxy. They may not mean to, but you're going to have to report on it. People are going to have opinions on it. And that's just kind of what it is. And, based off everything that I saw there and experienced myself, ESPN just doesn't have a stomach for that. Like, they just don't. They're not built to do that. That's not the lane they want to traffic in. They want to be the cool kids at the table that is well liked by everyone. But this time that we're in makes that impossible. And so they're going to step on some landmines. It's just bound to happen.
Yes. And speaking of stepping on landmines, that happens all the time on Twitter because, as you mentioned, you cannot win in this current world. We're going to have a whole lot more with Jemele drinking and thinking here when we return after the break. Hey everyone, welcome back into Drinks with Binks with Jemele Hill from The Atlantic. Jemele Hill is unbothered and talking about The Wire on the rewatchables. Remind me again what the name of that is.
It's called Way Down in the Hole.
Way Down in the Hole.
Yeah, which for people who are Wire fans, they know that's the name of the theme song of The Wire.
Yes, okay.
I believe it originally was done, I think it was Tom Waite who did it. And so
awesome,
it was recreated every season by different people. And so Way Down in the Hole, that's where we got the name.
Apologize for messing that up. I mentioned sometimes you have some of these, you're like, that's why you don't have drinks on TV. But that doesn't stop us.
That is exactly why you have drinks on TV.
Like, what did you say? We'll just repeat the interview because I forgot about it. That's what would happen at a bar.
Good.
You had, we were just discussing before just about your former employer, ESPN, and sort of the politics game and whatnot when you were there. When you haven't been there for a while now. You have all these other new projects that you mentioned. You're doing all these different things. What's sort of like your lasting feeling on your relationship with ESPN?
My lasting feeling, I guess, would be that we had a great relationship. Way more highs than lows. And yeah, some of those lows came at the end, but that's fine because I think it doesn't tarnish all the things I was able to do there, the kind of journalist I felt like I was when I left there. Part of the reason why I am able to have so many jobs is because I learned how to do so many different things at ESPN. So I'm never going to look at them with any animosity, with any anger in particular. I'm disappointed with some of the things that happened there. And yeah, I am disappointed in some of the people in terms of how I felt that they treated me / us as in, Michael Smith, my former co-host, dear friend of mine. And that preceded the whole Trump thing. I'm disappointed into how some of that evolved, particularly when it came to what happened with us on SportsCenter. But I would never look at ESPN negatively or regretfully. I mean, it's the best job I've ever had. It's the longest job I've ever had. To be there 12 years says a lot, especially in this business. So my feelings for it are just, I guess I know a lot of people don't have good relationships with their exes. I get it. I'll say it like this, when we reached the point where we were done, we were definitely done. But if I saw ESPN at the bar one night or out at dinner, I would totally go up to them and say hello and ask them how they were doing.
Oh, that's good. That's nice. That's how you know that it's you're not harboring any weird feelings for them. And Michael Smith, when he was on our show, you referenced him, your co-host from The Six, he had, he had similar feelings. Like, it is like a relationship, and it is, as you mentioned, kind of, it's not sad how it ended, because you accomplished so much, but in a way it felt a little bit weird as a viewer, I would say, how it ended, because you guys were so strong together. In what way do you feel that The Six was misunderstood?
Well, it was misunderstood from the beginning, and that misunderstanding was perpetuated by some of the people who were in charge of kind of nurturing and growing our show. I think they saw a lot of the cool things that we did on His and Hers, a lot of the things that went viral, the skits that we did, the funny moments that we had, and they loved those things. They loved the pop culture stuff that we brought to the table and how we were willing to take all these chances on television. But the same things that made us great were kind of the same things that don't really fit SportsCenter. And it's okay if it doesn't fit, if you're willing to bend and relax to what you think SportsCenter should be, so that we can be as great as you need us to be. And they weren't really willing to do that. And it was an awkward fit from the start, because we didn't have enough time to work on the show and figure out what the show was. And this is not to make excuses, because at the end of the day, we're getting paid nice money to make something work. And it's a whole lot worse places that you can be from SportsCenter. But it was by far like the worst job I had at ESPN, by far, because the brand is the baby of the company, understandably. It is a legacy brand, important brand. Incredible talent has sat in the seats of SportsCenter anchors, from Stuart Scott to Rich Eisen, Overman, Patrick, Kilborn, Rich Eisen, you name them all, everybody knows their names. But it's also, they're so protective that there's so many voices, there's so many hands that are on the show that it can at times make it impossible to do things. And Mike and I were very much coming from an environment where we were used to making every single decision. We were used to not necessarily doing what we wanted, but doing what we wanted to do. And that was what worked for us. I mean, we're very creative. We don't think we're like-minded, but we're different. Mm-hmm. And so it made it a challenge to have the kind of mindset we had and exist within the SportsCenter culture, because that culture is much different than any other show culture at ESPN. So I knew before our first show that we were in trouble. I knew it. I was like, we in trouble, man.
How come? What was it?
Creatively, we were on different pages all the time, too many times, about what was the best direction for the show. Mike and I did not love the fact that we probably did less than 5 rehearsals before we went to air. They took His and Hers all the way through December. We were starting the day after Super Bowl. And just so people understand, is that by comparison, like Scott Van Pelt it felt like almost a year to get his show together. Get Up got more than a year to do that show, right? So all these other shows, they got an extended period of time to rehearse, figure out personnel, get the production staff right, get all those things right. We got none of that. And there were some key people that we wanted that we didn't get because they had in mind who they wanted and how they wanted to do things. And that was fine, if long as those people understood what our vision for the show was. But from the beginning, our visions, we were just off. Like, Mike and I had our chemistry, but we didn't always have chemistry with the people who were put in position to make the show succeed. And so from the beginning, I had a lot of concerns. It was a lot of red flags. And, I don't know how deep you and Mike got into it, but he would tell you that I said before we started that there were red flags. A couple months in, I told him, I was like, man, at the end of this contract, I don't want anything else to do with SportsCenter. Like, dude, I'm done. Like, this is way before all the Trump stuff happened. I was already like, this ain't gonna work. And I thought that I would be able to finish out the contract, which called for us to do the show for 3 years, and, then just kind of say my peaceful goodbye. But after the Trump stuff happened, and then we went through another major show change. Somebody else got put in charge of our show, not the people who brought us in. We were literally like the quarterbacks that had been drafted, and then they fired the coach and changed the GM, right? And so, and then the new people that came in, we have been used to running a spread option, and they wanted us to run the wishbone. It was like, nah, man, like this is not gonna work. So once that happened, I was just like, I got to get off this show. And I know people read into me leaving as them kicking me off, but that wasn't the case. Like, it was in our contract that we had to do SportsCenter for X amount of time. For 3 years, we were guaranteed to do the 6 o'clock SportsCenter. And so I was only able to get off that show because I was willing to relax that language in my contract and go on to work for the Undefeated and do other shows that I enjoy doing, frankly, a whole lot more than I did SportsCenter.
Man, it's too bad that it was sort of set up in that way to essentially fail after having been, you guys just innately, you and Michael being so successful with His and Hers and not being able to get the resources that you guys needed, and kind of almost square peg round hole in terms of the brand of SportsCenter and all this. So it's too bad because you never know what could have happened. But I would like to ask you more about Michael Smith, but we got to take a quick break. We're going to have a whole lot more with Jemele Hill on Drinks with Binks. Don't go anywhere, guys. Hey guys, welcome back in Drinks with Binks. I'm JSB. We got Jemele Hill here, and we have been hearing all of the dirt behind the ESPN and SportsCenter, and it's nothing new. I mean, you've been very honest with your feelings about working there and not working there anymore, and so has your former co-host Michael Smith. And before we move on to some other things, I asked Michael on the show when he was on if he would ever want to work with you again. And he had like the best response. I really, to this day, one of the best quotes on our show, where he said, all these people are asking if Jemele and I will work together again. And where were all these mother when we were on the 6th? You guys couldn't get us off that show fast enough. And now you want us back together again. So I thought that was pretty on point.
And very accurate.
Yeah.
It's right. It's right. If I had a $1 for everybody who's asked me if we're going to work together again, are we going to recreate His and Hers, when's Mike going to be on the podcast, I wouldn't need to do anything but sit here and eat salted caramel ice cream and not work at all.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that we loved working together. We're still very good friends, and it was a very special relationship. I think there's parts of it that both of us would be hesitant to go back to, that we still have PTSD from, not from working with each other, but if we were to work again at a major network, I think both of us would be like, what? Like, it would be tough because of what we had been through before. But I do think that there will probably come a time where, under the right circumstances, where we're able to have that autonomy, creative control that made us great to begin with, if we're able to recreate that part of it, I think it would make it, a lot easier. And I don't know that if we'll ever work together in the same capacity that we did His and Hers. Because look, we're talking about His and Hers / SportsCenter. I mean, we were together every day for like 4.5 years. Okay. I don't know if we'll ever recreate that particular part, but I could definitely see situations where we would work together again. There's no beef between us, and it never was. I was very honest with Mike, even going through with the controversy, even all the fallout afterwards. And whenever I'm asked about, is there anything that you regret about how things happened, I will always regret the fact that he got put in a really bad position because he was left to clean up the mess. And the mess, being our show. It's like, I got suspended for 2 weeks. Mike didn't anchor at first, but then he did. And then when I left, he was anchoring by himself for like another month. So and it's important for people to remember this when you have a partnership, particularly a television partnership with them, is that every decision you guys make, even if it's in your best interest, it impacts everyone. Mm-hmm. And my decision to leave SportsCenter impacted him. And I felt, did I go through periods where I felt guilty about it or bad about it? Of course I did, because I was trying to maybe change the course of my career, but I was changing his at the same time, and he didn't really ask for that. So it was tough, and he never held anything against me. We had some long, like, deep come to Jesus meetings about it, and talked about it. And he was always super supportive. And that's why, we remained good friends. We were great friends before we started working together. We're good friends after. And so I think that is what I'm most proud of, because I definitely know other people in TV who may have spent years together every day. And as soon as that show stopped, never talked to each other again.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, and we're not really like
No.
that. So I don't want to disappoint the people by saying this. I would say never say never. And there have been conversations about maybe a couple things we might reunite about. So I'll just say that much.
Great. I mean, your chemistry is palpable, and everyone loves seeing that relationship. So would be no surprise if we got to see it again. But we're going to take a quick break, and then I've got to ask you a elephant in the room type of question when we come back. I think we all know what that's about. More to come on Drinks with Binks with Jemele. What a tease. I'm currently a broadcast journalist.
That's right. That's a tease in this business, boy. I'm like, whoa.
Whoa, what's she going to ask me? Hey guys, welcome back into Drinks with Binks. I'm JSB with Jemele Hill, and I wanted to ask you about, something that you're very well known for is when you called Trump a white supremacist, and he and his team and everyone acknowledged it. And I'm so curious, what was that moment like when, the president of the United States came after you?
Well, when he tweeted about me, I was initially unaware. I was not following the president. And so I didn't know, because during that time I was still doing SportsCenter, obviously. And because the show's at 7, I didn't wake up until usually about 10, maybe 9, 10, because I didn't have to be in the work till noon, 12:30-ish, somewhere in there. And so my phone started blowing up in the morning, because I think he tweeted this overnight. He's a middle of the night tweeter, apparently.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So I think he did that. Yeah, I think he did it based off his normal routine. And I have a ton of friends who cover news and politics, and they were blowing my phone up, and they were just like, "Oh my God, the president just tweeted about you." And I was like, "What?" So I looked, I was like, "Oh, that's cute. All right." And I rolled back over. So, I mean, it's just that I just felt like he's not somebody I take very seriously. I take what he does seriously because he's the president, and he has an extraordinary influence over a ton of American lives, including my own. So that part, his responsibilities, I take very seriously, but him as a person, I think he's a joke. So that being said, it didn't really make me feel any kind of way. Mostly I thought, I can't believe you have this much time on your hands that you would actually care about what a SportsCenter anchor has to say about, who you are as a person. All facts, by the way. And then for Sarah Huckabee Sanders to be asked about this during the press conference. Again, I have friends that cover politics, friends that cover the White House. And I was at ESPN we were putting together the show. I was in the SportsCenter hub where all the SportsCenter shows put together their show. And my friends are like, "Yo, you just got asked about in the press conference, blah, 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 blah." And I turned to it, and they had went to Twitter. And people have been posting the clip everywhere of Sarah Huckabee Sanders saying that I should be fired. And so I was just like, "Oh, that's good to know. The White House doesn't think I should have a job. All right." I guess, it was hard to put into words what I was experiencing in real time, because so much of it was practicing a little bit of cognitive dissonance. I couldn't even open Twitter on my phone because I had so many mentions that it was just impossible. So I didn't even get to open it. I opened it initially, and then for a couple of days, I honestly couldn't. So I couldn't even see everything and how people were reacting. I know I was trending because my friends were giving me reports about what was going on, and everything. And it was just, the biggest impact that had on my life was that it changed how I do my life, in the sense of I went to a Monday Night Football game, this is right, like kind of right after I was suspended, I think, or right around that time. Or maybe it was before. Either way, I went to Monday Night Football. It was Lions and Giants at the Met. And ESPN security was like, hey, we really think we need to have somebody with you because the ESPN switchboard had blown up and I was getting death threats. People protested, came to Bristol to protest for and against me. It was just a lot going on. And I had I had to have my voicemail at work disabled because when I picked it up, I mean, it was filled. And then when I listened to the first 2 or 3 messages, they were all death threats. Wow. And so I was like, you know what, let's just disable this. So, I don't really want to deal with getting any phone calls anyway. So, I mean, people who need to reach me, they know how to reach me. Yeah. I didn't even know my work number. So who cares? So it disrupted my life in the sense it made me super aware, a little bit anxious in public because I didn't know when people were like, hey, aren't you such and such? I didn't know if that, hey, aren't you such and such was coming from a good place or a bad place. I didn't know what was about to happen with every interaction. And so that was a little bit unnerving, if you will. But as much as, it had that impact on my life in terms of changing kind of how I moved and how I do things, I prefer to look at what was, the positives of it. There are people who said they drew inspiration from it, people who felt like, that it gave me a bigger voice. It gave me a bigger platform.
Definitely.
Added responsibility. Yeah, added responsibilities in terms of what to do with that platform, which I don't mind. And it's allowed me to do some of the things that I'm doing now. So for that, it's like, okay, there's a positive benefit. Oh, yeah, another interesting thing that happened. My mother was so pissed about Sarah. She was more pissed at Sarah Huckabee Sanders than she was Donald Trump. And she actually called the White House, which I thought was hilarious.
Oh, my gosh. And
she called the White House.
What did she say? What happened?
I don't know what she expected to happen. I was like, did you expect to get transferred to Donald Trump? Like, were you like, can I get, when they're just like, please state your extension or the person you're trying to call. If you say Trump, does it get you there? I don't know. But she was so upset that Sarah Huckabee Sanders had called for her baby to be fired that I'm telling you, if Sarah Huckabee Sanders winds up missing, my mama did it. Like, it's just like, she hates this woman because of that. And my mother's a bit of a conspiracy theorist. And whenever, she was in school at the time getting her master's, which she has now. And if it was something that didn't go right in terms of, her loan money or whatever, she'd be like, it's the government. They know I'm your mom. I'll be like, but it ain't got nothing to do with that. Like, she swore the government was watching her because of what I said. So.
Wow. Honestly, just hearing you talk about it, it is so surreal. I'm sure I'd be melted. I'd be microwaved because I'm a baby. If anyone came at me, because I'm super Canadian and I'm just like, whatever. But anyway, it's a remarkable story to have, a badge of honor that being able to sort of stand up for yourself and your beliefs and how you feel in that regard. We got to take a quick break, but we got more to ask you when we come back after this. Hey guys, welcome back to Drinks with Binks. I'm with Jemele Hill. I've got my janky headphones on. Apologies, my AirPods died, but what didn't die is my thirst and appetite for this Tito's on the Rocks that Jemele has so kindly decided that we drink today. And I am gonna pour one out for your Twitter mentions, because not even the Twitter mentions, but the trolls that you have, that they can even sense right now us talking about them, like they've known for weeks, they're just ready to pounce. How do you deal with Twitter?
Well, it's even easier to deal with Twitter now that I'm at ESPN because I can curse. So that's awesome. All right. So now I can just call people names and I can resort to all sorts of juvenile behavior that I wasn't permitted to do before. But one thing I do want for people to keep in mind is that, like you said, there are a lot of people who are trolls, but there are a lot of people who are dead ass serious on Twitter too, that kind of indicate that there's pockets of ignorant mindsets that are really out there that we really need to take seriously, just in the regard of knowing that the reason why there hasn't been more growth and progression in race and gender is because there are people out there who are actively working against that. So they're sport to me. I mean, I imagine this is how a deer hunter feels when they go out during deer season. I'm like, I'm here to hunt and kill, and you can come up in here talking that if you want to, but believe me, all that attention you ordered, I'm gonna give all of it right to you, and you're not gonna.
Do you know, like, when you're about to craft a tweet, like, this one's gonna scorch the earth right now, like this one's gonna get people going?
Yeah, I'm strategic about it, just in the sense of I pick perfect victims for sure, and usually when I do that, it's because I've gotten a lot of that same sentiment. So they're just representative. This is not the first person to probably tweet me something that I respond to. This is like the 800th. And so I decide, like, okay, now I got to make an example out of somebody so that y'all will take me seriously. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of entertainment for me sometimes, just because a lot of people come in there and they so bold and brave about what they say. But then, I have over 1 million Twitter followers. But then when they have like 300,000 people blowing up their Twitter mentions, then they decide that and understand that what they said really wasn't worth it, and they probably should have kept it to themselves.
Right. Well, you got some thick skin, and we got to go to break quickly. But what would you say to those who spew vitriol online and who are jerks?
Normally, well, I mean, what I usually say to all of them is like, look, don't let this professionalism that you see or these jobs I have fool you. Is like, I dare you to say this to me on the street. Like, if you're really about that life, then say it to me to my face, but I know you're not. So you're better off just whatever thought was in your head, just keeping it to yourself.
Whew, man, I am scared of you now, Jemele. I'm never going to say anything bad to you ever.
You're fine.
I'm so Canadian. I never would say anything bad anyway, to anyone. But on that note, we got to take our final time out on the program. We'll be back with more on Jemele Hill on Drinks with Binks. Hey guys, we've had an awesome time keeping it real here with Jemele Hill, who has so many different jobs all over the place and who was just awesome to talk to. Jemele, tell us where we can find you next.
All right, so you can always check out my stuff in the Atlantic. Jemele Hill's Unbother is exclusively on Spotify, meaning it's not on Apple, exclusively on Spotify. But Way Down in the Hole, the rewatch podcast for The Wire, that is available on Apple, Spotify, and also YouTube. So you can check me out on any of those platforms. And I don't have a super cool username, so I'm just Jemele Hill on any social.
That is perfect. Easy to find her. She is not at The Athletic. She's at The Atlantic, okay? And we are going to just chug these Tito's, and we're going to have a great night, as you are going to have a great night. See us next time on Drinks with Binks.